Feel very welcome. We are looking forward to our most rewarding evening. We are looking forward to an evening of great interaction. And this evening is slightly different from probably the one we would have had last year or the year before, because the CMRC, Most Respected Company Initiative, is 10 years old today. And I first want to take this opportunity to congratulate the founders of this initiative. One of them who is not here, but we'll see tomorrow at the Gala dinner, who is former CEO of Nation Media Group, Wilfred Kiboro. Let's clap for him in absentia. And the other one is none other than Charles Muchene, who is right over there, who has seen it through difficult times and nice times, who has seen it through all the countries during this period. And I think it's been a phenomenal success, if you ask me. I was just looking at the note, therefore, of 10 years ago, particularly about what the CEOs were saying. And some of the things that they were talking about, is hard to believe, is how to trade, how to get into Tanzania. And Tanzanians talking about how to get to Kenya. And Ugandans the same. And I can resonate with that, because in the business that I was then, what we used to do to sell to Tanzania is to sell to any Tanzanian relative who was in Mombasa. And to sell to Uganda, we were dealing with any Ugandan relatives who were around Kisumu. And they would promise us that they would get the goods across. And that is what we used to call exports. And now, 10 years later, and then the other things that they used to talk about, or we used to talk about, was the infrastructure. We used to talk about connectivity. We used to hear that calling Tanzania, or Tanzanians saying, calling Kenya is a nightmare. How are we going to get these governments to help us sort of even this basic thing of picking a telephone? We are in Rwanda, we are in Southern Sudan, and soon to go to many other places. So how time flies, and how the shape of business changes in such a short time. I must say, even if Nation Media has been involved, and there's an initiative that's been driven by Pricewaterhouse, that this initiative and some of the feedback that you as CEOs have been giving, in their own way, have played a role in helping open up the East African region. And I don't want to take a lot of time, because really it is for Charles to come and talk to us about what it is that we, the CEOs, have been saying about the landscape in East Africa, about the challenges that businesses face, etc., etc. But it is no doubt going to be a different scenario, because when you talk about connectivity, now you're talking about not just that telephone call that was difficult to make 10 years ago. We're talking about companies like Zain talking about one network. We are talking about the cable, the fiber optic cable, being connected across East Africa. We are now talking about how we can facilitate ourselves better to do business in those regions and beyond, which I think remains a challenge, how we can do more business amongst ourselves in East Africa, and how our businesses together can get the critical mass to now start competing beyond East Africa. I guess without further ado, I will now ask Charles to come and play back to us the kind of things that we've been talking about when we got those people interviewing us and asking us about how we feel about the new normal that no doubt should be with us in years to come. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks very much, Linus, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me also add my words of appreciation to what Linus has just said, that you could find time this evening to be with us. We know there are very many things that you could be doing on a Friday evening like today, and we very much appreciate the fact that you found this forum of sufficient importance for you to be here, and we can't take that for granted. Now, this is the second year when we're holding a session similar to this, and it's in response to the needs of the marketplace. Linus did say this is the 10th anniversary of the East Africa's Most Respected Company Survey, now called CEO's Most Respected Company Survey. And over the years, we've been looking for ways in which we could make the survey more relevant to the marketplace. And one of the things we've been doing over the years is revisiting the kind of business issues that are topical in the business community and trying to get thoughts and ideas out of CEOs and bring those ones back to the marketplace. But last year, what we did is we developed a much closer linkage between the survey that we carry out in East Africa and another survey that PricewaterhouseCoopers carries out globally called the CEO survey. And we borrowed the questions from there, and we asked East African CEOs to participate in the survey, and that was to feed into the global survey, whose results were going to be released in Davos, and it went quite well. And this year, we've done exactly the same. So since last year, what we thought we'd do is to have a session with the CEOs to debate those issues that are coming out of the survey. So that's by way of a background. Coming to this year's survey, what we thought and what the Global Fund did think is we've been almost a year into the economic recession, and hence the survey should be looking at what businesses are doing to come out of the economic recession. What are they doing to survive the recession? But much more importantly, what are the forward-looking businesses doing, and how are their strategies changing to position them in a manner that will see them thrive once we come out of the recession? And hence the theme of this survey, rethinking and reshaping the new normal. In terms of what we did is we went out and we interviewed 178 CEOs and board members across the region. This survey was carried out in September, October time this year, and many of you participated in the survey. In terms of the very high level and brief summary an overview that I'm going to give to you, I've split it into three components. One, the new normal. We have a new environment in which we operate. That's what we are calling the new normal. So what does that mean to our businesses? How has that impacted on our strategies? What kind of actions have we taken to see us through the hard times? And then the second part is talking about rethinking and reshaping. Because our strategies cannot be static when the environment is really rough. We've got to adapt to the new environment. We've got to rethink, and we've got to reshape, and we've got to reposition ourselves. And the hypothesis here is that the shock that was created by the economic downturn was so big that businesses would have to sit back and really overhaul the way they approach business. And in overhauling the way they do business, coming up with new ways of doing things, new strategies, new processes, that would then become best practice in a way. And hence, we don't expect businesses, certainly not the forward-looking businesses, to go back to where they were. And that's why we're calling it the new normal. In part 3 talks about the role of government. Has the government got any role to play in the new normal that we expect to see in the future? And if there's a role, is it going to be any different from the role they've played in the past? So looking at the new normal, there's a whole raft of questions that we asked the CEOs about the economic downturn, in fact, and I've summarized 6 of them here. And what the message coming out of that is there are certain areas where the CEOs had very divided opinions. If you're talking about whether there's going to be more open trade or not in the post-recession period, there were very varied views across the whole spectrum. If you talk to CEOs about the ability of governments and businesses to mitigate future risks, again, very varied responses. As were the responses around whether we are going to see multinational or global regulation, if you're going to see convergence of regulation, which would then be dominated by the bigger powers and some multilateral agencies. Again, there was a lot of varied response to that. However, there was some consensus on some of the questions that we asked the CEOs. For example, there was consensus that in our countries, we are going to continue to see the gap between the rich and the poor increasing, even in the post-recession period, and that the pressure on natural resources will continue to increase, irrespective of what the governments do and the best efforts of the private sector to try and save the environment and natural resources. We're still going to see a lot more pressure on those resources moving forward. And there's also consensus that the landscape is going to change quite considerably, whereby the influence of the large powers is going to continue to diminish, and we're going to see the continued rise of the new economies, and particularly China, Brazil, Russia, and India, and becoming fairly influential players in the global economy, and the G20 eventually displacing the G8 as the dominant economic and political powers. One other question we asked the CEOs was around business confidence. Do you see your business growing in the next 12 months? Well over half of the participating CEOs are very confident that their businesses will grow despite the environment that we have got. They're going to see growth in the next 12 months and in the next three years. Pretty much the same as the level of confidence that we had last year. Last year we did debate as to whether this degree of confidence was misplaced or not. And the debate has continued, but CEOs in East Africa continue to be very optimistic that we are going to register growth despite the economic situation. One of the issues that came out of the survey last year, as part of additional comments coming out of the CEOs, was that the economic recession was not something that worried CEOs in East Africa that much. They had much more immediate, much more pressing issues, and particularly around political risk. This year, we didn't have a specific question about political risk, and perhaps it would be interesting, Linus Kaikai, maybe when we are debating these issues, maybe trying to find out from this group of executives whether political risk is still a major issue and whether it's still much bigger than the economic situation that we're in. We also did ask businesses as to their prognosis as to when we are likely to see an upturn in the economy. We asked them, when do you think you're going to see the economy improving? When do you think we're going to see an upturn in your industry? And those two charts represent the answers that we're given. A lot of the CEOs expect that by the end of next year, business will be booming again. We'll have come out of the economic doldrums that we have been in. But the other interesting thing is that you see that CEOs are expecting much faster recovery in their respective industries than they are expecting around national recovery, which then begs the question: is why that sort of disconnect? Is it that CEOs expect their industry to be well ahead of other industries, or is it because there are other factors around the national recovery, maybe matters to do with the involvement of governments, that they see moving at a much slower pace and hence bringing down the rate of recovery overall? We also asked them for areas where they saw great opportunities for business growth. And as was the case last year, a lot of CEOs are saying, well, there are three big areas where we think growth will come from. We'll get better in our penetration of our existing markets. We'll deepen our existing markets. We are also going to develop new products and also increase our geographical footprint. So that's where CEOs in East Africa are seeing growth coming from. And maybe one of the things that we perhaps might want to get out of the participating CEOs, some of whom are here, is whether that in fact will help our businesses thrive in the post-recession period, or the post sort of difficult period, or whether there are other areas that we could be looking at that could help our businesses thrive rather than just survive. We asked CEOs about the threats coming out of the global economic crisis that are impacting on their businesses. And there's a whole range of factors and considerations that are listed there. And and we asked them to tell us how those ones were impacting on their businesses. I think the interesting thing is you see the areas which give CEOs a lot of concern are around macroeconomic stability. It's around exchange rate volatility, around inflation, and around regulation. And at the far end of the scale, you see that they're not too concerned about ability to finance growth and so on. In fact, you've got issues to do with the environment, about biodiversity and so on. CEOs don't seem to be too worried about that, which perhaps then begs the question, are CEOs in East Africa too worried about the problems of here and now to think about the longer term and perhaps potentially strategic issues in the next 12 months? And a lot of those areas are around cost reductions. A lot of people have worked very hard to contain their costs and will continue to do so. And a number of them have tried to look at the business processes. They have outsourced some of the functions. And a few have gotten into some forms of alliances, maybe not necessarily formal alliances or joint ventures. We also did ask CEOs areas where they thought there were going to be some major shifts in strategy. Whatever type of business risk you can think of. Issues around investment decisions, which is the best decision for us. Should we be making capital expenditure? Should we be making our investments elsewhere, maybe in people? Those are the kind of areas where a lot of CEOs expect to see some change. Plus areas around managing talent and responding to consumer behaviors, which behaviors they expect to be influenced by the changed circumstances, and getting customer loyalty is something that CEOs seem to be very important in their strategies. Looking a little more around the area of risk, CEOs said a lot of their efforts in risk management is going to go into the areas of gathering risk information and analysis, areas